There is an account out of the Powder River country that never saw print in any newspaper. It never appeared in the county books. The man to whom it happened did not speak of it for 56 years. He told it only once. He told it to a priest on the night of his dying, in a boarding house at the edge of a small Wyoming town, during the winter of 1934. The priest wrote it down. What follows is what he wrote. Before we step into it, if you're listening to this tonight from some quiet place, do me a small kindness. Drop in the comments where you are, and what the weather is doing beyond your window. I like to know who's sitting up with me tonight. A note before this one properly begins. If the kind of account I mean to tell you is the sort you'd want more of, not one but 10, each placed, dated, and told all the way through, there's a collection I put together, What the Mountain Keeps. 10 cases from 10 counties across 5 states from 1893 to 1955. Appalachian country, every one of them. Each a walk into ground that looked easy. Each signed off by the law with a tidy word that never once fit what happened. 10 hours of it start to finish. Made to be sat with in the dark, the way this one is meant to be sat with. The link is down in the description. It's pinned at the top of the comments. Now let me tell you about a man named Absalom Rutledge. Absalom Rutledge died on a Thursday night in a boarding house in the town of Belfry Springs, Wyoming, in the second week of December 1934. He was 82 years old. The woman who kept the house, a widow by the name of Vera Holston, had rented him a back room on the ground floor when he arrived by rail in the summer of that year. He had signed the register in a slow, careful hand. Under occupation, he had written retired. Under purpose of stay, he had written to die here. Vera had thought at the time he was joking. By December, she understood he had not been. Absalom Rutledge had come to Belfry Springs to die because Belfry Springs was, as near as he could figure, the closest town to a place he had left in the winter of 1878. And he had made up his mind that he was not going to be buried east of the Missouri. That is what he told Vera when she asked. He said, "I have a debt to the ground out here. I do not intend to be buried away from it." Vera did not ask him to explain. By the first week of December, he was coughing blood. By the second week, he could no longer stand on his own. On the Thursday afternoon, when the light was going gray, he called Vera to his bedside and asked her to fetch a priest. Vera said, "Mr. Rutledge, I did not know you were a Catholic." Absalom said, "I am not." Vera said, "Then what do you want a priest for?" Absalom said, "Because a priest is a man who will listen to what a dying man has to say, and not laugh, and not ask questions, and not run out of the room when it gets bad. If you can find me any other kind of man like that in this town, I will take him instead. But I do not think you will." Vera went to fetch the priest. The nearest priest was a man by the name of Father Ignatius Volk, whose parish was over in the next county, and who had been born in Wisconsin to a family of German farmers. Father Volk was 38 years old that winter. He had been a priest for 11 years. He had heard many confessions in that time. He would tell his own bishop 3 years later that nothing he had ever heard in a confessional had prepared him for what he heard from Absalom Rutledge that Thursday night. Father Volk arrived at the boarding house at 9 in the evening. Vera showed him to the back room. Absalom was propped up on 3 pillows. His face had the color of old paper. His breathing was thin and slow, and when he coughed, which he did every few minutes, it took him a long time to come back to himself. Father Volk sat down in a chair beside the bed. He said, "I am told you asked for me." Absalom said, "I did." Father Volk said, "I am also told you are not a Catholic." Absalom said, "I am not, and I do not intend to become one at this hour, Father. That would be a cheap thing to do, and I have never done a cheap thing in my life." Father Volk said, "Then what do you want of me?" Absalom took a long breath. He turned his head on the pillow and looked at Father Volk with eyes that had gone milk pale around the edges. He said, "Father, I want to tell you a thing, and I don't care if you write it down, or if you burn it, or if you forget it before the sun comes up, so long as one Christian man has heard it before I go. That is all I want. That and for you to sit here until it's done. Will you do that?" Father Volk said, "I will," Absalom said. "Then don't interrupt me, because if I stop I do not know if I have the wind to start again." Father Volk did not interrupt him. He sat there for 4 hours and 20 minutes. This is what Absalom Rutledge told him. In the fall of the year 1878, or thereabouts, Absalom said, "I was 26 years old, and I was hunting buffalo out of a camp near Deadwood. I had been at it 3 years then. I was good at it. I had a Sharps rifle a man had sold me in Yankton for $42, and I had learned to lie in the tall grass upwind of a herd and pick off the outside cows one at a time, so the herd would not run. A good stand, we called it. On a good stand, you might take 20 animals before the herd figured out what was happening. On a very good stand, you might take 50. By the summer of that year, the herds were already thinning. The big animals, the bulls we used to shoot in the 70s, were mostly gone. What was left were smaller and moved in smaller groups. A man who wanted to make money at it had to go further out to find them. I was running with a party of 5 that year, 6, counting me. The party leader was a man by the name of Merritt Yaws, 51 years old, Kentucky-born. He had fought in the war on the side that lost, and he had been at Chickamauga, and he did not speak of it. Merritt had a long face and a long jaw, and a way of standing very still when he was thinking. He had lost the tip of his left thumb to a mule kick before I ever knew him. He was the calmest man I had ever met in my life. I want you to remember that, Father, because of what he did later. There was a tracker with us named Cathcart Neighbors. We called him Cath. He was a Missouri man, 30 some years old, thin as a rail, with a nose that had been broken twice and set poor both times. Cath could look at a patch of grass and tell you what had walked over it 2 days back, and whether it had been in a hurry. I have known trackers before, and I have known trackers since. None of them could touch him. There was a skinner with us named Dorsey Kilmartin. Dorsey was a big man, 6'4", maybe more. He had come out of the California mines in the 60s, and he did not like to sleep indoors, no matter the weather. Dorsey talked a great deal, mostly to himself, and he sang hymns under his breath while he worked. He had a bad scar on his neck from a knife fight in Sacramento that he would not tell anyone the truth of. There was a young man with us named O. Braswell, a Kansas boy, 22 years old. He could shoot a Sharps as well as any man I have ever seen. On his worst day, he could put a ball through a buffalo's lung at 400 yards, and the animal would not know it had been hit for 3 of its own heartbeats. O was quiet. He read a book of Psalms most evenings by the firelight and would not let anyone see which ones. And the 6th of us was a Dutchman named Kessler Vandergrift, who was the wagon driver and the cook, and who kept the animals. Kessler was a fat man with a red face who spoke English badly and swore at his mules in his own tongue. He was maybe 40. He had been out on the plains since '69. That fall, we followed sign of a small herd west out of the Black Hills and into Wyoming, up along the Powder River and past the country where the Sioux had been driven off the year before. We meant to hunt through the first snows and be home before Christmas. None of us made it home. Absalom coughed for a long time after that sentence. Father Volk waited. When Absalom could speak again, he said, "Do you know that country, Father? The Powder River country." Father Volk said, "I have driven through it in summer." Absalom said, "In summer, it looks like nothing, just rolling grass and a river that is mostly sand. In winter, it is another thing entirely. In winter, the ground gets flat and white, and the sky gets flat and white, and there is no line between them. So you can walk for a whole day and feel that you have not moved at all." That country was empty in 1878. The Sioux had been pushed off it. The soldiers had come and gone. The homesteaders had not come in yet. There was no living soul between us and the Bygone Mountains except a trapper here and there, and the trappers stayed close to their cabins after October. It was, in short, the emptiest place I had ever been. We made our second camp on the 4th of November of that year, in a low draw between 2 ridges about 30 miles north and west of where the town of Buffalo stands now. There was buffalo sign in the draw, not much, but Cath thought there might be a small herd bedded down in the flats on the far side of the western ridge. That was the first night. The first strange thing was the quiet. I want you to understand what I mean by that, Father. On the plains in November at night, you should hear the wind. Always the wind. And you should hear the crack of the ice in the river. When the temperature drops. And the wolves at some distance. And the little scurrying things in the grass. You should hear a country breathing. That night, at some point after we bedded down, the wind died. And it did not come back. I noticed it at first. I sat up in my bedroll and I listened, and I could hear my own heart. I could hear Dorsey snoring across the fire. I could hear Kessler's mules shifting in their picket. But beyond the camp, no wind, no creak of the trees along the ridge, no animals. Nothing. I got up and I walked to the edge of camp, and I stood there. And it seemed to me that the whole country had gone as still as a room with the door shut. Merritt came up behind me. I did not hear him coming. He had been sleeping, and now he was standing at my shoulder in his stocking feet, holding his coat around him. He listened for a long time. Then he said quietly, "I have not heard a plains night this still since I was a boy in Kentucky. And I only heard it that once, and I did not much like it either," I said. "What was it that time?" He said, "It was the night before my father died." He went back to his bedroll. He did not sleep the rest of that night. I know because I did not sleep either, and every time I looked at him, he was lying on his back with his eyes open, watching the top of his tent. In the morning, Kath went out to scout. He left at first light. He was gone for 4 hours. When he came back at midday, he did not eat, and he did not speak until Merritt asked him what he had seen. And even then he took a long time to answer. He said, "I saw 12 buffalo." Merritt said, "Where?" Kath said, "About 2 miles west in a shallow bowl below the ridge." Merritt said, "What were they doing?" Kath said, "They were standing in a circle, facing outward." Merritt looked at him. Kath said, "I got within 100 yards. Not one of them moved. I could see their breath in the cold. I could see they were alive, but not one of them moved. And then when I came a little closer, one of them turned its head, just one, and it looked at me. And the others did not look at me. And the one that looked at me did not have the look of a buffalo in its eye, Merritt. It had a different look." Merritt said, "What kind of look?" Kath said, "The kind of look a man gives you when he knows your name." Merritt was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Maybe they've been sick." Kath said, "Sick buffalo lie down." Merritt did not have an answer to that. After a while he said, "We'll move camp 2 miles east. We'll come back in the morning and look again. Maybe they'll have moved on by then." We moved camp that afternoon. It was hard work in the cold. Kessler was in a poor humor about it and swore at the mules in Dutch the whole way. When we got to the new place, which was another draw, less deep than the first, Kath went out alone and walked a wide circle around the camp for an hour before he would let anyone unpack the wagons. He did not tell us what he was looking for. He came back and he said, "It's clean," and we made camp. That night we set a watch. We had not set a watch on the plains in years. There was no reason to. The Sioux were gone. The wolves would not come in on 6 armed men and a fire. But Merritt said we would set a watch that night, and no one argued with him. O took the first watch. Kath took the second. Dorsey took the third. I took the fourth, which was the hour before dawn. But it was during O's watch that it happened. Around 3 in the morning, O came into my tent quietly and shook me awake. He put his finger to his lips. He whispered, "Come see this." And I got up and pulled my boots on and followed him out. He led me to the edge of camp. He pointed. There was something at the tree line. "You have to understand, Father, that the tree line on the ridge above our camp was maybe 200 yards away, and the moon was up and the snow was reflecting the moon, and you could see quite well. There was a thing standing there. It was standing upright. It was taller than a man. It did not move. We watched it for a long time, maybe a minute, maybe 2. It stood exactly still. It was not looking around or shifting its weight or doing any of the things a living thing does when it stands somewhere for a while. It was standing there the way a fence post stands, only it was not a fence post. After a while it took a step. And here's the thing, Father. It took a step in the snow, and there was no sound of it. There should have been. The snow on that ridge was crusted over. It should have crunched. It didn't. It took one more step, and then it was gone. I do not mean that it walked out of sight. I mean that between one moment and the next it was there, and then it was not there. And the tree line where it had been was empty. O stood next to me with his rifle in his hands, and he was shaking. Not from cold. O did not shake from cold. He said in a whisper, "Did you see its head?" I said, "I couldn't tell." O said, "I couldn't either." That's what I mean, I couldn't tell. Not that it was too dark. That I couldn't tell. I did not know what to say to that. We stayed awake together until my watch. When Kath came out to relieve O told him what we had seen. Kath went and looked at the tree line for a long time. He did not say anything. He walked back to the fire, and he sat down, and he cleaned his rifle 3 times over before dawn. In the morning, we went up to look at the tree line. We found tracks. But here is where it gets to be a bad thing, Father, and I have thought about it for 56 years, and I still cannot make it come out right in my head. We found tracks, but they were not where the thing had stood. The thing had stood right at the tree line in the open, where we had seen it. There were no tracks where it had stood. The tracks were about 50 feet out from where it had stood. They were in a straight line. They came in from the east. They stopped 50 feet out from the tree line. And then they went back in the same straight line, on the same footprints. Do you understand what I am telling you? Whatever it was, it had walked in on those tracks, and walked out on those tracks. And where it had been at the end of them was not on the ground. And the tracks themselves, they were long. They were longer than a man's boot by half, and they had too many toes. I will not tell you the number. I do not want to say it out loud, Father. Not even now. But there were too many. Kath knelt down in the snow and he looked at those tracks for a long time. He did not touch them. When he stood up, he said, "Merritt, we need to go." Merritt said, "We came a long way for this hunt." Kath said, "I know we did." Merritt said, "We spent Kessler's whole wage on the wagons." Kath said, "I know that too." Then Merritt said, "Give me a reason." Kath said, "I don't have a reason, Merritt. I've got a feeling, that's all. But I have had it before. I had it in '63 at Vicksburg. I had it in '69 on the Republican River when the Cheyenne caught my brother. Both times I did not act on it, and both times I lived to wish I had. So I am asking you." Merritt looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "One more day. If nothing happens today, we stay. If something happens today, we leave." Kath said, "That is a fool's bargain, Merritt, because if something happens today, it may be too late to leave." Merritt said, "One more day." Kath did not argue further. Absalom stopped there and drank some water from a glass on the table beside the bed. Father Volk waited. When Absalom set the glass down, his hand was shaking so badly that the water spilled a little onto the blanket. He did not seem to notice. He said, "You still with me, Father?" Father Volk said, "I am." Absalom said, "It gets worse from here." Father Volk said, "I understand." Absalom nodded slowly and closed his eyes for a moment and gathered himself. And then he went on. "That day we hunted. Kath found a small herd about 3 miles south of the camp. Real buffalo, not the standing ones, 9 head. We took 7 of them. It was a clean stand. O did most of the shooting, the way he always did, and I spotted for him, and Kath and Merritt worked the flanks in case the herd broke. The herd did not break. When the 7 were down, the last 2 just wandered off, still not understanding what had happened. Buffalo were like that, Father. They were the trustingest animals on earth, which is why we killed so many of them. May God forgive us. Dorsey and Kessler came up with the wagon, and Dorsey started in on the skinning. He was fast. On a good day, Dorsey could skin a full-grown bull in 11 minutes. He hummed while he worked. That afternoon he was humming a hymn I did not recognize. When I asked him what it was, he said his mother had taught it to him, and that he did not remember the words anymore, only the tune. We were done and back in camp by 4 in the afternoon. Merritt was in a better mood. He said, "You see, Kath, a day's work. A clean day, Kath said. The sun goes down in an hour, Merritt said, and Kath said, you said one more day, Merritt. It's not over yet. Merritt did not answer him. O took the first watch that night. He was not going to sleep anyway. He had been quiet since the night before, and I had noticed that he had not been reading his book of Psalms that evening. He sat by the fire with his rifle across his knees and his eyes on the tree line, and he did not blink for a long time. I bedded down around 10. I woke up at midnight because the wind had come back. It had not come back the way wind comes back. It had come back from all directions at once, and it was moving inward toward the camp. Do you understand, Father? The wind was blowing from the east and the west and the north and the south, all at the same time, all into the middle of us, as if something big was breathing in. And on that wind was a smell. I have hunted every kind of animal that lives on the North American continent, Father. I have smelled a wolf pack in mating. I have smelled a bear that had been in a carcass for a week. I have smelled the pile of buffalo hides we made outside Cheyenne in '76. 5,000 hides drying in July. A smell you could smell from 3 miles off. None of those smells was like this one. What was on that wind was old snow and burnt hair, and underneath those something older. Something that did not belong on any range I had ever hunted. Something that I do not think has been on the earth in the time of men. Absalom coughed again. Hard. Father Volk got up and refilled the glass of water and held it to Absalom's lips. Absalom drank. He said thickly, "Thank you, Father." Father Volk sat back down. Absalom said, "I want to stop here for a moment, because what I have to say next is the part I have never said. I have said everything up to this in my own head. I have gone through it every winter for 56 years. Every winter, when the snow gets to a certain kind of depth, I go through it, and I always get to the next part and I stop, and I turn around, and I go back, and I start again, because the next part I have never said out loud, not to anyone. So I am going to sit here for a moment and gather myself, and then I am going to say it, and I would ask you, Father, to sit quiet while I do, because I do not think I can say it twice." Father Volk sat quiet. He waited perhaps 2 minutes. Absalom took a long, slow breath and he began again. When morning came, O was gone. His post was empty. The fire had burned down to a red glow. His rifle was in the snow beside the fire, standing upright, buttstock down, as if he had planted it there like a fence post. And it was still standing that way when Merritt found it. His footprints led out of camp in a northerly direction. We followed them. They went about 30 yards, and then they stopped. They did not stop at a stream. They did not stop at a rock. They did not stop at anything. They just stopped. The last print was of both feet side by side, as if he had come to a halt and had stood there for a moment, and then there were no more prints. Kath walked out beyond that point and made a wide circle around it twice, and then a third time. He said, "There is no other track anywhere. Not going any direction. Not in the air." Merritt. And Merritt said, "Don't joke, Kath." And Kath said, "I ain't joking. I said not in the air. I meant it, because I do not know how else to say what happened." Merritt sat down in the snow next to the last footprints. He sat there for a long time. Then he stood up and he said quietly, "We are leaving now." Kath said, "I told you, Merritt." Merritt said, "You did, and I am sorry." We turned to go back to camp, and that was when we heard O call. Before the next part, let me stop for one breath here. If this is the kind of case you would want to sit with in the dark, not just tonight, but to keep, there is a longer thing I put together with the people at Forbidden Unresolved Stories. What the Mountain Keeps. 10 complete cases. 8 hours of them. 62 years of records that nobody wanted to finish. From Appalachian counties nobody was ever going to look at twice. Each one placed and dated and signed off with a tidy word that never once fit what had happened. The link is in the description below. It's at the top of the comments. Now, let's go back to it. O called from the west first. His voice came across the draw as clear as if he had been standing at the edge of camp. He said, "I'm over here." Just those 3 words. "I'm over here." Merritt turned toward the voice. He took a step, and then he stopped. He said, "Oh!" He shouted it. He said, "Oh, are you hurt?" There was no answer. Then the voice came again, from the east this time, from behind us. Oo's voice saying, "I'm over here." And then a third time, from a low place in the draw we had passed 4 days back, from behind a ridge you could not see over, his voice saying, "I'm over here." Kath drew his pistol. He did not aim it at anything. He fired it straight up into the sky. 3 shots. The sound rolled out across the plains and came back to us thin and small. The calling stopped. We did not hear his voice again. We went back to the camp. We did not speak on the way back. Kessler was standing beside the wagon with his shotgun in his hands and his eyes very wide. He said something in Dutch I did not understand. Kath said in English that we were going home. Kessler crossed himself 3 times and did not put down the shotgun. We tried to leave that afternoon. The horses would not be saddled. I want you to understand what I mean by that, father. We had 6 horses and Kessler's 4 mules. Every one of them, when we came near, rolled its eyes back and put its ears down, and would not stand still. One of the horses tried to bite Dorsey. When he put a hand on its neck, it broke the skin. Blood came through his coat sleeve. Kessler's lead mule, an animal I had known for 2 years. An animal so patient in ordinary weather that Kessler used to hang his coffee pot from the harness while it walked, kicked at me when I came near. I had to jump backwards to keep from being killed by it. It took us 3 hours to get them saddled and hitched. By that time it was after dark. Merritt said we would leave at first light. He said no one would sleep. He said everyone would sit up by the fire, back to back, weapons out until morning. That was what we did. That was the night Kath went. I did not see it happen. Nobody did. He was there at midnight. He was on my left. His back was to my back. I could feel him breathing. He was holding a rifle across his knees. At some point after midnight, I closed my eyes for a moment. I do not think I slept, father. I think it was a moment, maybe 2. But when I opened my eyes and I turned my head, my back was against nothing. Kath was not there. His rifle was there, laid across the log where he had been sitting. His bedroll was 10 feet away, untouched. His boots were sitting next to the bedroll, side by side, laces neatly tied, as if he had gotten up out of them. As if he had stepped out of his own boots and walked away in his stocking feet into the snow. But there were no prints, father. There were no prints at all. Not around the boots. Not going any direction at all. Merritt said, "Wake everyone. Wake them now." I woke Dorsey. Kessler was already awake. He had seen it. He had seen Kath one moment and then not seen him the next. He had been looking, father. He had been looking right at him. And Kath had not stood up, and Kath had not walked away. He had simply not been there anymore. From one blink of Kessler's eyes to the next. Kessler was praying under his breath in Dutch. His face was wet with tears. He was a stout man, father. He was not a man who cried. He was crying that night. Merritt said, "We ride now in the dark. We ride now. We rode east, all that night." The stars did not move. I do not know how else to tell you it. The stars should have wheeled overhead the way stars do. They did not. They stayed where they were all night, from the time we broke camp until the sun came up. And when the sun came up, it came up in the wrong place. Not the east, not exactly. Somewhere between the east and the north. I want you to understand, father, that I am not a fanciful man. I have never in my life claimed to see something that I did not see. I do not believe in ghosts, and I did not believe in them then. I am telling you what I saw. The stars did not move that night, and the sun came up in the wrong place. And when I said as much to Merritt in the morning, he said, "I know. Don't say it again," because he had seen it too. We rode all day. The land did not change. We passed the same rock formation 3 times. It was a formation of red sandstone that had a shape like a fist if you looked at it a certain way. We passed it once in the middle of the morning. We passed it again around noon. We passed it again in the middle of the afternoon, and we had not turned, not once. Merritt was leading. Kath was gone, but Merritt knew that country as well as any man alive. He was leading us straight east by the sun, and we passed the same rock 3 times. By the 3rd time, Merritt reined up his horse. He sat there in the saddle for a long time. Then he said quietly, "We are being turned." Dorsey said, "By what?" Merritt said, "I do not know. Do not ask me again." Kessler had stopped speaking altogether by then. He was sitting in the wagon seat with the reins in his hands and his mouth moving without sound. Every so often he would touch the crucifix at his neck. Around evening we came up on a rise, and below us, in a shallow bowl of snow, we saw the buffalo. Absalom's voice had gone very thin by this point. He was breathing shallow. Father Volk asked him quietly if he wanted to rest. Absalom shook his head. He said, "No, Father. If I rest, I will not start again. Let me finish." Father Volk nodded. Absalom went on. The 12 buffalo Cath had described, standing in a circle, facing outward, not moving. Their breath did not steam in the cold air. Their eyes did not blink. Their ears did not flick at us as we came up on the ridge, and in the center of the circle, standing upright, was the shape. "Father, I said before that I would not describe what I saw. I said that on the plains that night, and I say it now, because there are no words for it in the English language, and there are no words for it, I believe, in any language that men have made. But I will tell you 3 things, Father, and only 3, because that is what I told myself I could bear to say. It was tall. It was wearing something that was not skin and was not cloth and was not fur. And it was looking at me, not at Merritt, not at Dorsey, not at Kessler, at me. It was looking at me from across all that distance. And it knew my name. I do not know how I knew that, Father. I did not hear my name. I did not hear anything. But I knew it. The way you know when someone is calling for you in a crowd, even before you can hear them properly. That was how I knew it was calling me. It knew my name. Merritt said very quietly at my elbow, "Absalom, do not look at it." Dorsey said, "I already have." Merritt turned his horse. He said, "Ride." We rode. I do not remember much of the next hours, Father. Not clearly. I remember Merritt praying out loud in a Kentucky country voice I had not heard him use before. He was reciting the Psalms, the 23rd Psalm and the 91st Psalm, and one that I did not recognize. He said them over and over. His voice was steady. His voice was the only steady thing. I remember Dorsey humming. He was humming the hymn his mother had taught him. He hummed it steadily all through the night. He did not stop, not for water, not for anything. When I looked at him, he was staring straight ahead, and his eyes were wet, and his mouth was moving in the shape of the tune. I remember Kessler in the wagon behind us, calling out to his mules in Dutch. The wagon could not keep up on the ground we were riding, and it fell behind. I remember looking back once and seeing the lantern on the wagon growing small in the distance. Merritt would not let us stop for it. He said, "Kessler will follow or he will not." But we do not stop. I remember my mother. I remember that I began at some point in the night to hear my mother's voice ahead of me calling me. My mother was named Prudence Rutledge. She had died when I was 15 years old of a fever in the state of Indiana. She had been dead 11 years by that night. I heard her voice calling me from a little way ahead of my horse, off to the north side of the trail. She was calling my name the way she had called me in for supper when I was young. She was saying, "Absalom, Absalom, come home now. Supper's on." I would have gone to her, Father. I would have gotten off my horse and gone to her. But Merritt was riding beside me, and Merritt reached over without looking, and he took hold of my bridle, and he did not let go of my bridle for the next 4 hours. He rode with one hand on his own reins and one hand on mine. And every so often my mother would call me from a different place, and my horse would try to turn toward her, and Merritt would pull my horse back to the line. Merritt saved my life that night. Father, I do not know what he heard calling him. He never told me. But he did not turn toward it, and he did not let me turn toward mine. By dawn of the second day, Dorsey was gone. He did not scream. He did not cry out. He did not fall behind. I turned in my saddle to look at him once, and he was there, riding with his mouth still shaping the tune of that hymn. I turned back to the trail. I do not think a full minute passed. Then I turned to look at him again. His horse was still there, walking on. But the reins were hanging loose, and Dorsey's coat was folded neatly and laid across the saddle, as if someone had taken the time to place it there just so. Dorsey was not on the horse. I said, Merritt. Merritt looked back. He saw. He said, do not turn around. I said, Merritt, we have to go back for him. Merritt said, is already where he is going, and so are we. Ride. I rode. My ears started ringing then, Father. A high, thin sound like a bell. It did not stop for 3 days. Kessler was gone too by then. His wagon had fallen back in the night. We did not see the wagon again. I do not know what happened to him. I have thought about that for 56 years, Father.